Hello there, Drew Anich of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. Today, I just got through recording a interview that I am really looking forward to sharing with you. It will be the 100th Whiskey Lore The Interviews interview, and it is Richard Patterson from White Mackay. And I had to get somebody on that was somebody who I had a lot of respect for, somebody that would be top tier for me in terms of people that I want to interview. And it's 2 hours long. It's a great interview, and I am looking forward to sharing that. He has such a wealth of knowledge going all the way back into the 1960s in terms of his career in the blending game and in terms of working through the whiskey industry and working at some great distilleries. Somebody else that I really respect in the world, in the whiskey world, is John Teeling, and his sons, Jack and Stephen, opened up the Teeling distillery in 2012. That was right after both of them worked for their father at the Cooley distillery, but when Beam Suntory purchased the distillery, they were shuttled off, and so they had to make it on their own. Well, they got some money out of it, so that helped. And they decided to put that money to work and opened the first distillery in Dublin in 125 years in the Dublin Liberties. Great distillery tour. If you are ever in the area, I would definitely recommend it. What's great about that tour is that they run it every 20 minutes. So if you are trying to schedule multiple tours around town, because there's definitely some good distilleries in Dublin to go visit, then Teeling is the easiest one to work around in terms of your timing. And right around the corner is the Dublin Liberties, which has a great selection of whiskeys as well. Daryl McNally had worked on most of the stuff that you're probably going to be tasting there now, and he left, of course, to go off to Limavady. So interesting, but I have done a tasting on the single grain Teeling before, but I just went to the store and I was like, what am I going to buy? And I have this little obsession right now with pot still whiskey. I want to taste everybody's pot still whiskey that's over here. There's not a lot of them. You've got your Redbreast, you got your Spots, and you got your Powers, and you've got, Redbreast, I think I said. And then there's a variety of them. Busker, I've done the tasting of the Busker on here as well. And so the idea of the pot still, again, is that this is made from malted and unmalted barley, unlike single malt, which is made from all malted barley. And so they can do different percentages. It's got to be at least 30% unmalted, 30% malted, and then they can use up to 5% of something else. Some use oats, so on and so forth. Or you could just use malted or unmalted barley to fill out the rest. And so that's what they have done at Teeling with their pot still. 50% malted, 50% unmalted, no other grains in on this whiskey. It is triple distilled. The idea behind triple distilling is to lighten the whiskey up a little bit. Pot still whiskey can be very oily and heavy. And so when we talk about triple distillation, again, it's a great reason for triple distillation is in doing pot still whiskeys, whereas single malt, you know what? I mean, I don't know. You can make great whiskeys out of them, but I think in some ways it can be a little bit of overkill to triple distill. Just depends on your distilling technique. Personal opinion, but I like a whiskey with some body, and part of what I like about pot still whiskey is that it usually has some nice body to it. So this is a 46% ABV. It is actually aged in 3 different types of barrels. It's aged in virgin oak. Okay, so they're basically, usually you're going to get maybe a little bit more your caramels and vanillas out of that virgin oak. Then we go for a bourbon barrel, ex-bourbon. You're going to pick up a little bit more of that probably through that. And then you're going to finish off with some sherry. I don't know if it's Oloroso, don't know if it's PX, but they did use a sherry cask in the maturation to a certain extent with this whiskey. It is non-age stated, I don't think that's a deal breaker for pot still. Pot still, to me, not overly young, but not overly aged either, I think works really well for pot still. All right, on to the nose. And you get a floral vanilla out of that. And I wonder if that floral vanilla is coming from the virgin oak. A little bit of lemon and lime. Definitely a lot of sugar cookie in this. Shortbread. And I think, again, it's a little bit of a grain note. Usually with pot still, you're going to get a grain note in there. I might have to do a blind on this at some point because trying to pick out a single malt versus a pot still, when I see pot still, things come to mind immediately, and maybe that sways my taste buds. There's a little bit of buttered biscuit here too, and when I say biscuit, I'm not talking English biscuits or cookies, whereas here I'm talking about buttered, flaky biscuits that you have gravy over for your breakfast. A little bit of baking spice in there, not really getting much in terms of an influence from the sherry barrel. Cheers. This isn't as heavy, probably, as I would normally expect a pot still whiskey to be. Just a little bit lighter. Pepper sits out front, grain is underneath. It's not aggressively peppery, but that kind of cinnamon pepper note, that heat is there for some time. The grain is nice with a little lemon note coming in. A lot of herbaliness. I'm getting some earthy notes in there. I get a little oiliness on the palate as well towards the end. But again, that sugar cookie is kind of there, just a little bit. That grain note that I expect to get out of a pot still whiskey. So this is a little lighter in character, I think, body-wise, than some of the pot still whiskeys that I have had. And it's a little drier on the finish. There may be a little bit of dried fruit coming through on the finish from that sherry barrel, but this seems to be much more influenced by the virgin oak and then some by the bourbon barrel, but really not as much from that bourbon barrel as I would expect. So yes, the vanilla is coming through, not a lot of caramel notes, that sort of thing on top of it. So very interesting, because one of these days I'm going to have to do a comparison of this versus another pot still and kind of see what the differences are, because in isolation, this feels like a pot still whiskey that's a little drier, as I say, on the finish, has many of the characteristics up front that you expect. On the palate itself, it's a little more pepper forward, probably, than some of the other pot still whiskeys I've had. Hope you enjoyed this. Have you had it? What do you think? Leave your messages below, and subscribe if you'd like to watch more of these along the way. And until next time, cheers and Slainte.